Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, and coming at you today with not a deck profile, but a tier list video. So yeah, also a face reveal. Now, this is quite a change of pace, you might be thinking, and that's right. I already got done with a lot of the deck profiles I wanted to do. I was a Paladin main, and I thought, hey, at least one deck for each Paladin clan, and then I'll be satisfied with the preliminary run of my deck profiles. Of course, more will be coming on the way later, but that's to be decided. One thing that is going to be coming a little bit sooner than later is going to be my versus battle, where I take some of the decks that I profile and use them against some of my friends. That's going to be coming soon, probably around mid-February. It's delayed because I haven't been quite be able to meet up with the boys just yet, but that's going to be coming pretty soon. So trust me, guys, it's coming. That aside, this tier list right here, just for a disclaimer, this is by a lovely fellow down here called Nick McGain. So he's actually another YouTuber, and he did a tier list video, and it was a pretty spicy one. So please, this is not originally my tier list that I made. So do go check him out. I'm going to put a link in the description to his video there, and show him some love, guys, please, for me. Another thing is, how are we going to actually be ranking all these fine units here? Well, let's lay some ground rules. Some people seem to rank by strength, others do it by personal preference, others still seem to just have a feel for it. I don't like that, right? Where it's like, oh, this thing, it feels like a B tier, right? I don't do that. I think that's just bad practice. So how I'm going to be ranking these is I'm going to be taking a look at the units here. And these units are sometimes a part of a whole. Other times they're very standalone units, like you've got Kagura with 3 grade 3s. So in the cases where they're more standalone units and it's just its own grade 3, and there was probably several grade 3s within the clan reveal, I'm going to be ranking them more on their individual basis. But let's take someone like Salome here, right? Where all 3 of them were Jewel Knights and they were kind of centered around Salome. I'm going to be looking at them as a whole. So wherever I place her is also going to be a placement for those other Jewel Knights. And the placement is going to be based on more or less their strength, the viability. I'm not going to be ranking them so much on personal preference. The personal element is going to be in how much I've tested them and how much my friends have tested them, and they've given me feedback for that. So we're going to be looking at more of a objective tier list as much as I could help it. I haven't done all the testing in the world, but I've got enough to do a pretty good impression of most of these units. And yeah, there's definitely some disparity here to be had. So then let's go ahead and start off. We all good, fellas? Let's begin. Starting off with Salome. So Salome, I'm glad to start off with her because she is going to be a sort of a gold standard. This is a very, very strong card, possibly a meta contender. WCC's channel has already released some preliminary deck lists with a lot of these units, and so we kind of see which ones have been doing pretty good and which one of them not so hot. Jewel Knights have been doing pretty good, and one of the things that's going to really put them near the top here isn't just because of the fact that they're very strong and Salome is a beast of a unit, but also the fact that they're somewhat splashable still. Salome has some interesting implications in decks like MOB for a late game push, has some pretty cool things to do with Sanctuary Guard as a sort of a break ride, quote unquote, option. You've got even implications in Gancelot, putting her on rear, then putting a Blaster Blade over so that Blaster Blade can get a drive, because of course Gancelot makes a Vanguard, so they twin drive now. Yeah, there's a lot you can do with Salome. And Eunice, the grade 1, is also very good. A generic Soul Charger, bounces back to hand, a la Cider from the Genesis reveals. And overall, yeah, I don't see a lot of flaws with these cards. I think these cards have ridiculous potential. And on top of that, it's very likely that our reverse unit, aka the next set, is going to be more Jewel Knights, because Ashley reverse was a thing back in the anime. So in all likelihood, we'll be getting more Jewel Knights, and that is going to be quite a day. All right, then. So moving on from that, we've got some pretty good stuff here with my boy Ezel. So Ezel here is going to be going in great stuff or very strong. This one is a little bit tricky for me. I think the deck is more of a great stuff thing, but the cards individually are incredibly strong. Are they meta though? It's debatable. So for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is great stuff, the top of great stuff even. Here's why. So Ezel as a unit, just an individual unit, Ezel Scissors is very phenomenal. He's a very loaded card because he's got the abilities of all the other Ezels potentially. So to get the most out of him, you do have to run a lot of Ezels. That's both a good thing and a bad thing. It does give the deck a lot of ability to generate Excel markers. You don't even need to run Percival in the deck. I found that Percival is actually a bit bricky in the deck, although you still run Aglavale because best grade 2 in the clan, if I do say so myself. And yeah, he also has some pretty wicked effects. Unlocking does give him that little hint of generic value, but that's only really going to pop up if you find that your meta has a lot of Starvator in it, which, spoiler alert, I don't think these new Starvators are going to really warrant such alarm. And in addition to unlocking, there is the shutting down of auto abilities. That's actually a little bit more intriguing than the unlocking bit. Getting the drive is cute, and actually getting the drive is really good because he works well with Platinum Ezel, who has the ability to modify his drive checks and superior call mid-battle. So yeah, overall, it's really strong. Grade 2 Bacdemicus and grade 1 Lion. They're also really good Ezel support cards. So I'm really, really tempted to put them up here, but I think the deck is just a little bit bricky for my liking. And on top of it being bricky, it also is purely for Ezel, it feels like. Sure, Ezel has some generic implications, but those implications are a bit unfounded at the moment. And the grade 2 and the grade 1 are more or less just going to be straight Ezel support as well. So yeah, I'm just going to put it there. Revengers. This is going to go in very strong, possibly meta contender. Here's why. No, guys. I'm not wearing my bias on my sleeves. I swear. Some of y'all might think, Raging Fall Reverse, he's horrible. He's doo-doo. He's hot garbage. He's not, guys. He's actually very, 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 very good. And let me explain why that is. So the thing about Raging Fall Reverse is it gives the deck a lot of fallback that it didn't have to. Here's the thing. It had to sort of rush a lot with Raging Form and use Mordred as a finisher. That was basically how you would play Revengers for the most part. It was very limited that way, and it was very, very linear. Now, with our good old boy Raging Fall Reverse here, that's not the case anymore. Raging Fall Reverse is a good early ride. You can chill on him. You can get this sort of Dauntless-esque effect if you lock 3 of your rear guards, because now you're just pitching 3 for a restand. You don't have to counterblast all, you just pitch 3 for a restand. So this is also good against Damage Knife if someone even attempted it on you. I don't know why they would, not in V anyway. But in addition to that, 15k to the front row is no laughing matter. You've got force markers here. If you're really going for Dauntless Reverse, sorry, not Dauntless Reverse, that's another unit on this list. If you're going for Raging Reverse, and you're like, hey, this is the guy I want to do, you can even do Force 2, theoretically. Force 2s are actually fairly permissible in this as well. So that, and the fact that it's also a good late game option if you're burning through your Raging Forms and you've got nothing else to sit on, you could really sit on this. Again, he doesn't really require Counterblast if you don't want him to require Counterblast. And there is also that niche little combo with Raging Form where Raging Fall can restand if you're at 5 damage and you use the Counterblast 3 and the Discard 3. So it's possible. It's not going to happen very much. There was a video on Freedom Duo's channel where this actually took effect and it won the game. But other than those really fringe options, he's really just more of an alternative ride target, and that's all he needs to be. One of the things that really keeps him up at very strong, rather than just like great stuff or even decent tier for lowballing him, is the grade 2 and the grade 1. Rakia and Rukia are by far your best ride targets in V Revengers right now, and they're also really good at what they do. Rukia is not only a good ride target, but he's also relegated as being a pretty strong, or at least decent attacker at 15k. And then you've got Rakia, which is honestly kind of a highlight. Not only is he a grade 1 ride target that was desperately needed in V, because prior to that, you're basically only good ride target was Renal, which you wouldn't even want to ride because you prefer to use his boost skill as a rear guard, right? But anyway, yeah. So other than the Renal, there was nothing else. I mean, we were going to do ride Masquerade, Claudus. Yeah, what were you riding, buddy? Yeah, nothing. So yeah, Rakia really changed that and gave us a very sweet, simple +1 for a ride. And also Soul Blast 2 to revive something is really good in late game. So yeah, overall, I think as a whole, Revengers are very strong here. I think that especially if a ban list comes, and I'll talk more about a ban list after all these picks because it's going to sort of contextualize clan collection here, right? I think if a ban list came and hit Luard a bit, Revengers would almost certainly rise on up and become the next big Shadow Paladin deck. Would it be the top? Not necessarily, but I think Revengers definitely have at least rogue or tier 2 potential currently. So imagine, with these buffs and the other meta going a bit down, I can imagine that there's a lot more of an equilibrium there. So yeah, be on the lookout for these guys. They're pretty great. Celestials. Celestials is another bit of a tough one. On one hand, I tend to think that Celestials are pretty freaking strong, and I think that this actually helps them out. But on the other hand, these feel a little bit more side grady sometimes. So here's the thing. I'm going to go ahead and put Celestials at the very top of decent tier. This could be a little bit lowballing, I'll admit. I actually think Celestials will become one of the next Angel Feather decks if Gabriel takes a hit to Hamiel and all that. But here's the thing about Celestials. The reason why I put them in decent is because even though they're pretty good as it stands, the cards that they got have not exactly been the most pertinent. Grade 3 Ramio Reverse, right? She isn't that useful. Sure, she's a nice finisher, but one thing I found issue with her is her skills sort of contradict each other a little bit. The thing is that her main appeal is that she has a guard restrict, right? Where they have to use a bunch of cards from hand in order to guard her. That's all fine and dandy. But if her other thing is that she gets a lot of power, like a boatload of power. Like this unit can potentially get plus 40,000 power, right? So we're looking with, let's say, presumably an 8K booster, we're looking at a 60K Vanguard here. If you're forcing the opponent to use 4 or 5 cards from hands, but you also have a big power buff, it's kind of weird because other than a Sentinel and punishing the Sentinel by having to make them use up a lot of cards anyway, they're already going to have to be using 4 or 5 cards. So it almost feels redundant. And because of that, I don't like her too much. Base Ramiel almost feels like the thing you want to go for 9 times out of 10. And this is just some niche thing. The only thing I really see this doing is if your opponent doesn't have the Counterblast 2 in order to prevent this effect, and they don't have a lot of cards in hand, then you could almost assuredly kill them with it. So having it around is good, but I don't see this being a 4 of in the Ramiel decks. And on top of that, the grade 2 is kind of neat. Being able to call out more units from the deck is pretty cool. I think Danielle is sweet that way, but Danielle is just okay. She's decent. It's Narelle, the grade 1, that I think really helps a lot with this, right? I think Narelle's going to keep Celestials near the top of the decent tier. Has a good potential because Narelle is honestly exactly what Celestials needed. She's a fantastic piece in order to get you exactly what you want, and so there's no debating that grade 1 is going to be an automatic 4 of included in a Celestial deck. Witches. I'm thinking Witches is going to go into great stuff here. The Witches that we got were fantastic. And it says this fills out a little bit more. I might put this more towards the bottom of great stuff, but Witches has some really, really good tools. This is sort of phenomenal what Bushy did with Witches, because now we actually have an OGT deck that has graduated from being a 3-attack clan. And not only is it graduating from being a 3-attack clan, it's by way of an extra Vanguard swing. So that's phenomenal. Your Protect Marker gimmick is also in good effect here. They definitely kept that in mind with this card. And all 3 of the Witches, they went 3 for 3 on these. You run all 3 of these Witches in the deck, if not just straight up at 4-up staples. Now, that may not be terribly surprising because admittedly Witches in V particularly are pretty bad. They weren't doing much of anything. They just really fell by the wayside for a long time. So of course they'll be running all of it, but still, I think this deck is definitely something to look out for in more of the roguish sense. I think people have been really trying to make it work, and trying is a little bit of a overstatement. It's actually been working pretty well. I found that in testing, if you use your Protect markers right and you get just enough, you can really stop a lot of the high-powered decks like Dimension Police, decks that, well, essentially Force decks, right? So it's definitely got a good defensive body, and now that it has more of an offensive push, and the Grade 1 and Grade 2 Witches help with more of your consistency element, yeah, it's really, really, really nice. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly how to support Witches. Okay, so now we're moving on to the first Grade 3 that doesn't actually represent all of their clan reveals. So here's Himiko Reverse. So Himiko Reverse and good old Yatagarasu. These are actually going to be going in different tiers. Yatagarasu is going to be going in decent. She'll be pushed down a little bit more. Himiko is going into great stuff, though. Himiko is, we'll start with her. So Himiko, and I'm also going to put Cider in with Himiko here. I think Cider is definitely, it's a support card for both of them, but I think Cider more particularly is a prominent in Himiko builds. So here's the thing. Himiko was a little bit surprising. I think at first people were pretty meh about her. They were pretty lukewarm. People liked her effect, me included. I thought her effect was actually pretty sweet, flavorful, a cool implementation of the self-locking, because this was the first reverse unit in V that was revealed. So it didn't seem very like meta defining, though. It seemed pretty cute. Here's the thing, though. Being able to get an on-demand defensive trigger and a draw on top of that for the price of a counterblast is pretty strong. I think if you're going against Excel clans in particularly, this is even worse for them than MLB potentially, and that's saying something, right? So yeah, and that mixed with the fact that there is an offensive pressure because you could just use her effect during your turn to get 2 crit effects, or just ride back in a regular Himiko. That's one thing about this deck's a little bit weird, is when to ride reverse Himiko and when to stick with regular Himiko can be a little bit ambiguous. How offensive and defensive they are seems to be rather interchangeable, but there's nuances there. It's somewhat of a difficult deck to pilot if you're trying to be perfect about your plays. And you're not always going to get your Himikos going. Sometimes you'll want to rewrite and you can't. So there isn't like so much marker acceleration, but generally speaking, you'll still get like at least some force markers because some amount of riding is going on, since Himiko Reverse can ride on top of regular Himiko. So yeah, overall this card is very strong. I think it really adapts the Himiko playstyle and balances out a lot more. And of course, Cider, if it was just Cider would go into possibly like very strong. Now, not a meta contender because it's a grade 1, but I think this is one of the best generic supports that the clan has ever seen, at least in V for a while. So yeah, that's going to be a thing that really bumps up Himiko up here. Yatagarasu is a bit of a different story. Yatagarasu feels a little bit more gimmicky. She does have a pretty cool range of effects if you Soul Blast a lot, but because the Soul Blasting is limited to just a Soul Blast 3, you have to be very particular about the grades that you're Soul Blasting. Some people have proposed that in order to achieve the ranges of like 7 and 9 grades Soul Blasted, that they kind of take from Astral Poet's book and run Valkyrian in there, so that by soul charging Valkyrian, you've already achieved at least a 5. That's a cool idea. The thing is, though, it doesn't seem all that consistent. So really, you're going to have to look at it from the basis of, okay, is it inconsistent but explosive? Sort of. You sort of get this Mordred Phantom effect where, yeah, you stand up 2 and they get buffed, the entire front row gets buffed rather, and you could potentially even get a draw 2, right? But here's the thing. The fact that the draw 2 is the 9 and not like a 5 or something is a little bit weird. It seems a little bit anticlimactic. You would think the draw 2 would be your minimum basis and then you would work up, but that actually works in the card's favor because then you're really only compelled to Soul Blast total grade of 7 off your 3 soul, which is definitely workable. You can do combinations such as 2 grade 3s and a 1 or 2 grade 2s and a 3 in order to achieve 7. And of course, with Valkyrian, then this is virtually a non-issue because then you can just do 5-1-1. But that said, it's sort of basic. The support around it is good enough to make it okay, but there's nothing really exceptional about it, and it doesn't have the greatest follow-up if you don't have good soul. So yeah, I'm only going to put it in decent. If it got more support, then maybe Yatagarasu can be a lot more explosive. I've seen some videos like from Commander Jaime's channel where you can pair this off with CEO in the rear guard. The CEO can hurt in of herself, could be a restanding rear guard. So you can get like 7 attacks off of it, but that's very counterblast reliant. So you're only going to really explode with it once. Okay, so anyway, moving on to Dragon Empire and Kagero. So Kagero here got 3 different grade 3s, so I don't even need to bring up supporting grade 1s and 2s. These guys are just 3 different play styles. Dauntless Reverse is going into great stuff. Blazing Flare is going into very strong, and Dragonic Lockkeeper is going into meh. So let's explain that one by one. Let's start with Dragonic Lockkeeper down at the bottom. Lockkeeper showed a lot of promise at first. I think some people sniffed out immediately, though, that it seemed fairly overbalanced, and I was a little bit late on that. I admit, I was kind of a hype beast for Lockkeeper. I thought the fact that you can sort of limit your opponent's offensive pushes at the start of each of their battle phases was a really, really sweet idea. But there's the cracks kind of show, because the problem with Lockkeeper is if your opponent can have a workable offense with just 1 or 2 rear guards, they can really, really play around you. Your buff only really occurs if they have no rear guards, but at the same time, you also buff their Vanguard. So it's sort of same to same translation. There's not really much of an advantage to be gained from there. It's kind of neat though, if there's like no back row. But the thing is, you kind of have to, in order to make the most of Lockkeeper's effect, you have to like invest a field, sort of. So that can be managed, that can be arranged, but you're also sort of leaving yourself vulnerable, because if you're playing against another removal clan, then they can sort of snipe your own rear guards off during main phase, and then someone's like, uh-oh, Lockkeeper doesn't have as much presence on the field, and because its effect is based on how many increments of 3 rear guards are on the field, your opponent can really turn that off. Additionally, just the fact that the opponent can just lay down some rear guards and just get them back, he doesn't permanently bind them. If he permanently binded them, then there'd be a different story. Then it's actually a hard removal, and your opponent would not be incentivized to just call down a bunch. But as it stands, it's more of just a delay card, and it doesn't have any real good finisher properties. I think Dragonic Lockkeeper has better implications in premium, because then you can rely on Kagero strides in order to be your offensive push, but he can be played around. So that's the problem. If your main win con is hoping that the opponent can't play around you, that's dubious at best. Dauntless Reverse, great stuff. I think in premium, this isn't really going to say much, but I'm going to be looking at this mostly in the perspective of V. I just want to bring a premium because that's Lockkeeper's only saving grace, if we were to just look on the bright side there. But yeah, Dauntless Reverse in V is pretty cool. I think as a standalone unit, he's quite powerful. The way that he implements the locking ability is pretty sweet, because it's very cognizant of the fact that in a Dauntless deck, you don't need to really invest units on the field, which is very much unlike Lockkeeper, funnily enough. And so, yeah, you have a lot of free space to work with. You may have like 1 or 2 rear guards in the front row, but usually, yeah, it's just like, okay, slap Dauntless Reverse, get a Force 2, and start swinging with him. The cool thing about Dauntless Reverse as a unit is he eliminates the concept of the 2 to pass, because in theory, he should always be able to achieve at least 2 to pass. So if your opponent has to like do something to pass, they're going to start sweating. If they PG it though, then sad days for you. A PG just really gives the middle finger over to Dauntless, unfortunately. And another thing about Dauntless Reverse, even though he's an awesome standalone unit, the thing that stops him from being a very, very strong unit is to get the most out of this effect, you have to break ride over regular Dauntless, because then you get to re-swing with him and thereby use the effect all over again. But you only really get that once, so it's more of like a turn 4 pop off and hope to kill them. Otherwise, you're going to be kind of slow turn 5 onwards. And this is very typical of a V Kagero type of strategy, especially with Dauntless. But of course, because of the presumably mass retiring and even marker destruction that you'll be inflicting upon the opponent, they'll be in a hampered position too. So even more of a simplified game state, the Dauntless Reverse should be able to operate fairly well. So yeah, that's why he's great stuff, but he's not necessarily like some meta contender, because he's His tempo isn't limitless, and there isn't exactly like this wealth of rear guards that directly support him very much. Okay. Blazing Flare, on the other hand, goes into very strong. This is more in the category of very strong and not meta contender. And the reason why for this is because Blazing Flare as a rear guard is absolutely phenomenal. The fact that you do not need him to necessarily be a Vanguard in order to get like all this retiring is kind of ridiculous, actually, when you think about it. And he's also a marker destruction thing. So if you really felt like it, you can like really go ham and destroy markers if you Soul Blast 5. And so it's like it's a true field wipe, but you don't need it. And so Soul Blast is a bit of a touchy topic in Kagura. It feels like they don't build that much soul, but they like to use it in certain instances. So it feels like you have enough until you don't. So Blazing Flare is like, well, you would think he contributes to the problem, but because of his other skill where whenever he attacks, he can soul charge one, you make up the cost. You don't even need to necessarily use the skill right away. You can just attack with it as a van or a rear, get some soul charges in, and then ride into this thing and field wipe the opponent. If they're in a sensitive position, I know some decks really, really would hate a field wipe, Aqua Force. So yeah, he's really cool. He's really flexible. And yeah, the thing that puts him at very strong is the fact that he can be a rear guard as well. Nubatama. Nubatama's going in decent. So the cards in themselves are pretty cool. But the thing that gets me about them is they're purely for Magatsu, and Magatsu was a bit of an archaic playstyle that has more holes than Swiss cheese. So the thing is, this guy right here, Magatsu reverses a standalone unit, is fantastic. The fact that he gets rear guard drive checks is cool pressure, but his real highlight is whenever he's retired, you can Soul Blast one to add it back to the hand and force the opponent to discard. Now, obviously, this works with original Magatsu Storm as he retires two in order to get the pseudo PG effect. But this can also work by other means. If your opponent isn't reading well that day, they can possibly retire it due to battle or an effect and not read the fact that it's whenever it's retired from your guard, period. It's not by an opponent's skill or your skill exclusively. It's just whenever it's retired. The Soul Blast doesn't get made up very often, though, so you aren't going to be using this infinitely. I didn't use this very much, but a buddy of mine has actually been using this like a fair bit, so I've gotten a good taste of what it does. So yeah, he's pretty cool, but he's not limitless. But I think, yeah, this is definitely the highlight of the Magatsu reveals. The other two, they're cool. They definitely give you more searchability. The grade 1 helps you get both your grade 3s going, and the grade 2 can potentially net you a Magatsu. The problem is the grade 1 and the grade 2 aren't actually technically Magatsus. They're stealth dragons, I believe. And so they don't actually work so much with the Gatsu playstyle. And even the reverse is like, hey, lock all your non-Magatsus. There's a little bit of a name inconsistency due to that. So yeah, it's a bit clunky, but it's got cool plays. And I think the support on their own is really, really cool. It's just that the deck that it's based around still really shows its signs of age. And no, guys, Magatsu Storm's PG effect only works on a Vanguard attack. So yeah, you can't deny hamming with it, unfortunately. I really want to put that out there because people for a split second would think, oh man, this is awesome, but then it's actually fairly limited. Okay. Military Raptors. Military Raptors are going to be going into great stuff here. I'm going to put them right in between Himiko and the Witches. So the Military Raptor series was, for those of you who don't know, it was a ride chain back in the old days. And these guys really, really live up to it. These are fantastic rides. And our good old Raptor Colonel in particular is just so awesome because he embodies the Tachikaze Engorge mechanic where you get a nice restand for getting rid of like 5 cards, but then also you get like really good big power buffs that sticks with him for the turn. So he's going to be a big devastating Vanguard that's coming at your face. So it's very much in line with the deck style. It's cognizant of equip gauges. The military Raptors are equip gauge friendly, so you can use them with generic support. You can use them with ancient dragons. Break riding this on top of Spinal Driver can be particularly devastating, I think, or heck, even the other way around if you just want to go for an end game. So yeah, all around they're really splashable, but the searchability of them and the fact that Raptor Colonel is a strong, powerful win connoisseurs to work towards puts them in the great stuff tier. They're not a meta contender, I feel, because it's still Tachikaze. They haven't gotten anything really groundbreaking, and I don't think they're popping up in the meta very much. And I wouldn't necessarily call these guys like very, very, very strong. Because yeah, it's the Tachikaze thing again. It's not like they're revolutionary or anything. They still do Tachikaze things. They just do it in a streamlined way that offers you more direct benefits than a lot of the other units does, in my opinion. Anyway, I'm not much of a Tachi guy, and no one in my group actually is. Murakumo. Okay, so now we have another 3 grade 3 situation here. As the first grade 3 is Weasel Black. Weasel Black is going to be going over into great stuff. I'm going to put it near the bottom of great stuff though. So Weasel Black is for the Weasels, and I think that this was less of a boost and more of a must-have for the deck because they didn't have a grade 3 ever prior to Weasel Black, much like Blue Wings. When are we going to get a Blue Wing grade 3 bushy? Actually, please, maybe not waste a slot on that. We want Transcore. I guess they can release it alongside Transcore, but I'm getting off track. Okay. So, Weasel Black. Weasel Black has actually kind of a ridiculous skill where he's able to sort of do a Legion-esque effect and put back cards from the drop zone to the deck. It's only normal units though, if my recollection, so it's not like you can put back triggers to this. But yeah, he puts back normal units and then you can stand a bunch of your Weasels up and your Weasels get power buffs and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely got like a lot of convention to it and gives Weasels a solid win condition to work towards. And the fact that he can just on demand get Weasel Red, which for those of you who don't know, Weasel Red will allow you to pitch any number of cards from your hand in order to call the equivalent number of Weasels from the deck, is really good searchability. It's a very, very consistent card. The only thing that really brings it down, I feel, and doesn't like make it very strong is this is still Weasels. And the problem with Weasels is they have very little card advantage. They're a lot like another Murakumo variant we're going to get to in a second, which is Stealth Fiends, right? Where Stealth Fiends sort of equivocate extra attacks to card advantage, so you don't really have like hand advantage and defensive abilities going on out the wazoo, but in exchange that's just sort of involuntarily converted into an outward push. But these are like the epitome of like Excel clan pushes, you know. They're not like big numbers, they don't really have like crits and drives and stuff coming to them, right? It's just basic multi-attack. So yeah, it's still a good boost to Weasels, and I would say that the only other thing to mention is that Weasel Black is not a base of 12. So Weasel Black being a base of 8 is actually very surprising because that means that he actually could be lower in base value than the average bear. So I've actually seen cases where Weasel Black has only been like 10k power, and as a result even force number grade 2s can swing over him unboosted. So yeah, that can kind of suck. Domino is also great stuff, but he's going down here. I'll put him up. These guys are pretty interchangeable, but I'll just put him in front of Weasel Black for now. So the thing about Domino is Stealth Fiend support. He can inherit the name of Stealth Fiend, and he also has the ability to bounce himself back to hand. So that's one way where if he's called to the field, you can actually free up a space, which then makes calling back to the field with the effect of Nero Hyoga, presumably, actually a +1. So yeah, all in all, he's really good. The fact that as a Vanguard, he can get an extra drive check is really amazing to me. That really helps with the fact that with Nero Hyoga, you are not getting advantage. I get it. The wave in Nero Hyoga is to run a bunch of draw triggers so you can at least get something for your drive checks. But guys, no, this right here, this just feels better. This feels like something you want to ride early, and then Nero Hyoga is more of your finisher than anything. And also just using Soul Blast for it is a resource that you don't really see used in Stealth Fiends hardly at all. They use Counterblast, but they don't really use Soul Blast. So you've got plenty of soul to work with for Tom. Hyaki Vogue is going in decent. Hyaki Vogue Reverse. Hyaki Vogue Reverse is a pretty cool unit in theory, but the problem is that the whole Hyaki Vogue Flood playstyle, well, you can get like some good cloning going on. You run into an issue because you're very reliant on getting other Hyaki Vogues out there, which of course he gets that, but then you're having this weird thing with your deck where you want to put them back and bounce back other stuff and just keep on like cycling that, but your opponent's plays can be very destructive to it. If your opponent's like attempting field bites, which you can get around by the way, but if you have units out there, which you will after a while, that's going to be a problem. Other things about this is after a while, Hyakis can start to stall out if you start drive checking them. You don't have a lot of them in deck. So yeah, they'll start to stall out. You may not always have too much Soul Blast going on, but the thing about Hyaki Vogue Reverse is because you're bouncing back Hyaki Vogues and he's treated is that you can actually Persona Ride him each time. So that could be a thing to try and constantly get more targets. But this is where the stall out happens because now since you're riding Hyaki Vogue's reverses, the other ones are trapped in the soul and then probably the drop zone afterwards. So unless you put them back and there are cards to put them back, the engine's just going to sputter. And that's fine and all, right? Why is it not higher though? Because it seems like even though the engine can sputter, it doesn't sputter for a lot of turns. The problem really at its core is even though you get a lot of units, they're not impactful. They're not very strong. The only way to make them stronger is with the effect of regular Hyaki Vogue, which if you have 5 or more units after it calls a Hyaki Vogue, then you can buff units by 10k, and even then that's not like some big massive awesome buff, right? So it's just basic Excel clan shenanigans that can barely get over defensives. And yeah, other than that, it's just decent. I think if it had more cards that were treated like Hyaki Vogue but they weren't like a grade 3, that could really help it, but I don't think they're going to go that far. I mean, maybe there's a promo and promos can get kind of wild, so who knows, right? They can really do something. Okay, so water time. Okay. Next up, Dungaree. Dungaree is like going up here, dude. This might be one of more quote unquote spicy takes. Dungaree is fantastic. Dungaree is a monster of a unit. And the other 2 units with him really boost the playstyle of the self-bind, right? Having a base of 17 is already fantastic, and the fact that you don't even need to worry about self-binds for just keeping the base of 17 defensively is awesome, but having the extra crit, having extra drive, I mean, he sort of feels like a mini stride when you think about it, and not like the Gear Chronicle mini strides, but like his own sort of flavor of it as a grade 3. So yeah, that's amazing, right? The only problem with it is you do need to maintain self-binds, and that can be tricky, but you do have a lot of cards with it. You got the new grade 1, got the new grade 2. You can do things like Joggy Shot. You can do things like Zubar. You can do things like Sharif. Look these names up if you want to like know what they do, but let me just say they all do self-binding. Soul Blast can be a little bit weird for it, but that's why I've found that running Eradicator, what's his name? Demolition Dragon. Yeah, the Demolition Dragon. Demolition Dragon's ability really helps there with that. So yeah, because Demolition Dragon can go into Soul, so that's sort of a pseudo Soul charge. The fact that Dungaree is also sort of a rearguard skill, because his main skill can be used on rearguard is cool, because what that means then is if you want to run a hybrid, like let's say you just run him as a tech choice in, let's say, Eradicators, right? Then yeah, as a rear guard, he's a 17k 2 crit dude, and that could be kind of cool, especially if you're buffing him up with, say, like Vowing Sword or whatever. I don't see that really happening in V. That's more of a premium implication. Premium, this thing's especially powerful because of that, because then yeah, your Vanguard will be like a stride or something. But yeah, in V at least, he's like at the top of great stuff. This thing can very well break into the meta. I 100% see that happening, especially if you got more support. But as it stands now, I'm already sold on Dungaree. I think anyone who thinks Dungaree is just kind of like meta or whatever just hasn't really seen it played correctly, you know? All right. Stargate. We've done Dragon Empire and United Sanctuary, so now let's move on to Stargate. We've got Ethics Buster. Ethics Buster is going into Matt. above Dragon Blockkeeper. The thing about Ethics Buster Reverse is he's sort of contradictory to the playstyle of Beast Deity because he's locking standing rear guards. So it's sort of weird trying to support Ethic Buster. And you're like, well, Godsman, the reason why he does that is so you can get extra Vanguard attacks. But the thing about it is the deck doesn't really do too much for you if you're doing the Vanguard attack type playstyle, right? It wasn't meant to do that very much. I get that regular Ethics Buster does have a skill based on that, and I think there was another card in Beast Deity that had like an effect that synergized with this, and people were bringing it up as a counterpoint, but whatever, right? The fact of the matter is that the deck sort of stumbles over itself trying to support this, and I'm going to go into another card later that is a lot like Ethics Buster that way, but actually does it a lot more gracefully. But yeah, this deck isn't very graceful with reverse, but that isn't going to be a knock on the other two Beast Deities because Brainy Papio and Max B, oh man, these guys are really good consistency and extension pieces. Like, these are really, really good Beast Deities. And I would say, like, if you want to put him near the low end of decent, you can do that because of those Beast Deities. But I think as it stands right now, Ethics Buster Reverse is a cute playstyle that isn't garbage, but it isn't properly incentivized. Zero is also going into map. The zero cards are cool. The fact that they're very cognizant of the fact that you're a grade 3 deck and you will probably ride into other stuff like Daikaiser or Brad Black into Daikaiser, heck, maybe even a great Dayusha, right, is pretty sweet. The zero starting out at a base of 0 power, though, is avant-garde to say the least, though. That's kind of rough. That can make him a lot easier to hit, in fact. But can I just say that pitching a grade 3, albeit it is a specific cost, right? Pitching a grade 3 to make a unit's critical become 0 is so sweet if you're fighting something like Hamiel. I will automatically like something a lot more if it can stop Hamiel, and this is a card that does just that. But as it stands, yeah, I'm putting it pretty low here because this is the attack reduction side of Dimension Plays for you guys who don't know, right? Dimension Plays seems to be in one of two camps mainly, where one side is buff up the Vanguard, which is like the side that's mostly well supported, and then you have the reduce the opponent's Vanguard power, which is just inferior because when you reduce an opponent's power, sure, they'll go into negative numbers and stuff, but in terms of what they need to defend, it's still it's just inferior, right? They will still need to defend more if you buff up by a higher degree than if you lower them down. So because of that, ultimately it's less for more. When you're doing the D Robo playstyle, or as maybe we'll get Enigmans and it won't just be the D Robo playstyle, but mainly, yeah, just buff up power playstyle. I mean, at least it's better than the crit playstyle, Grand Gallop, sad days, F in the chat for Grand Gallop, right? But yeah, reduction playstyle, no. You go ahead and play this with Zeal if you like the reduction playstyle, but I'm not convinced on it. Starvators, putting in a bottom of decent. These are better than the last batch of Starvators. Let me just say straight out. Infinite Zero was people wanted it to be like promising. It turned out not to be promising as actual testing was put on the sucker. And these guys are different. Can I just say that the previous client collection for Starvator was just crappy overall too, because Palladium, not that great. And Colony Maker, way too overbalanced. It's not even a plus for you. What the frick was up with that, Bushy? These guys are better, though. So, yeah, Nebula Lord is cool because it can get the drive. It can walk regardless and then get the drive, perhaps. But it's very easily played around. The highlight of Nebula Lord is the fact that he has this really big buffing that goes on. His buff stacks, and he buffs like all of your Starvators. So in a pure Starvator deck, which considering more and more support that are coming out, and we're probably going to get Glendios next set, right? There's going to continue to be more Starvators. Yeah, you got a lot of targets to choose from. So yeah, this really turns Starvators into a beatdown deck, and I will give it a lot of credit for that because that wasn't what it was before. It doesn't really feel like a beatdown deck unless you're going into the really late game and you've stolen a lot of markers with Chaos Breaker, but that's very iffy, right? So with Nebula Lord, the situation changes and you're definitely beat down. And he also synergizes with Infinite Zero better, presumably, because Infinite Zero will net you a lock or two, and then he'll get you a lock. And so, yeah, if your opponent's invested into the field, which, again, that's iffy, yeah, you get so much power buffs. And another reason why he's in decent tier is, while he himself is pretty cool, Radon and Neon is sort of like up and down for me. I think Neon is weird, but he's better than Palladium, so I think that's a better use of your counterblast than Palladium was. So you might run a copy or two for his revival. Radon people didn't like because of the fact that he binds himself after battle mandatorily. Here's the thing though. Radon is a free +1 from the drop. You only get it once, but you still got a +1 in field advantage that you otherwise would not have gotten. Sure, it can cost a Soul Blast, but Soul Blasting is a prevalent thing in Starvators already. So, because of the fact that he's free if you have 1 or less soul, you're usually going to be calling him for free, buddy. So, yeah, that plus the restrict, which, again, you know, the fact that you have to call 2 or more is cool for poke, but it's actually a little bit weird when you're doing it in tandem with a beatdown playstyle. So, again, it's sort of like a Romeo reverse situation where why have huge numbers and force your opponent to use a lot of cards to guard, you know? It's really just to try and, like, punish PGs, I guess, but the moment that PGs isn't an option for them, it just sort of backfires on you. So it feels a little bit weird, but still, I like Radon. I think Radon is a cool, like, rear guard finisher potentially, and so they got some stuff there. Okay. Next up, Ammon. Ammon's going way up here to great stuff. I'm going to put him behind Ezel, though, and he's up there with Himiko. Okay, so the Ammon grade 1 straight up isn't all that great, but 2 and 3 are pretty cool. 2 gets you a lot of soul charges, but it's, man, Demo Marquee Ammon, dude. For those of you who haven't watched the anime in a while or just haven't watched the anime in general, this may not necessarily occur to you, but this guy right here, to my recollection, was like the first big Dark Irregular boss. He's such a nostalgic card, and I love it, right? All the way back in the original era. I remember him back when he was used in the first bout, and I think actually the only bout, right? Between Tetsu and Aichi. And that was such a cool fight, and it really gave Dark Irregulars a good showing as to, like, what a soul-based deck could really do. Because Pale Moon was right beforehand, but the stacking of the soul and building up power just seemed like a much better presentation of a soul mechanic. So yeah, a lot of nostalgia and sentimentality behind this card. But it's a monster. For you Yu-Gi-Oh fellas out there, this is essentially true Shula on steroids. So for you non-Yu-Gi-Oh guys out there, here's what this translates to. He picks cards from the opponent's hand, field, and drop zone. So he's picking off 2 at a time by you actually picking off 1 at a time. Picking off meaning they suck up 6 in a soul, you suck up 3 in a soul. 1 each from you, 2 each from them. If they can't do it, he gets a drive. For every 6 of your soul, he gets 10k power. 5k on rear guard, but 10k as Vanguard. So even as a rear guard, he's potentially beefy, right? Although I would imagine you probably want to rewrite him, not just to build, not just for building up soul, but because also protect markers can be pretty sweet here, right? So yeah. He gets power buffs based on your soul, but he gets criticals based on the opponent's soul. And so, yeah, if your opponent isn't able to do enough of that soul blasting there, for every 6 in the soul, he can be potentially devastating as a big Vanguard. So like he's actually kind of like what you would assume Reiji should have been, right? Except the critical part of it is based on the opponent's soul, so there's still a little bit of weird stipulation. Any effect that relies on what the opponent is going to do is usually a little bit bad, but this is fine because you force them to do it, right? If they can't suck up 6 even, he'll get a drive. So there you go. You immediately pay back for advantage. An Ammon deck here is a little bit strange because it seems like between sucking up the rear guard and sucking up the card in the hand, and the fact that you're not getting like extra drive checks unless your opponent doesn't fulfill the first effect entirely, you run out of advantage quickly. And one of my buddies, he's the same buddy who was playing all the draw triggers in Hyoga, right? So this tracks, but he was running a bunch of draws over in Ammon 2 to try and make up for the card advantage, but I think that's incorrect. I think the thing is that you should instead run the crits to be more devastating. And leave the card advantage and card economy to cards like Gilderay and also there's a Vampire Grade 2 Doppelvamp here. And they have abilities to like bring stuff out from the soul again, and then in tandem with cards like Ironheart Assassin and Variance Killer Tail, of course, you can keep on getting your counter charges and whatnot. So yeah, this is pretty cool for building up soul. The card advantage is a little bit weak. I think if you can figure out your card economy issue and you can like guard, then this is devastating because your opponent losing 2 rears and 2 cards from hand every turn, it's like Giraffe on steroids, like honestly. And Giraffe was one of the best cards that Mega Colony ever got, which we'll bring up Mega Colony later in that card. But yeah, one last thing to note. I did not realize this, but guys, Ammon really can enable Gasteel. My boy got Gasteeled on turn 4. He already had 20 cards in soul, and this was just turn 4. Yeah, imagine that for a death, right? This, if you want to run Gasteel in here, by all means, you can even run NLK. So yeah, Ammon's versatile, right? You've got a lot of finishing options that you can do with him. So yeah, overall, yeah, he definitely is a great boost. If you can solve the card advantage thing, he would be very strong. Okay, next up, Luquier. I wanted to put Luquier and the Silver Thorns in great stuff, but I'm just going to be content with putting him in decent tier. And the reason why I'm going to put him in decent tier mainly is because one of my homies plays Silver Thorns a lot, and he's pretty fervent about the fact that she's just okay. The Luquier is a weird unit because she demands a lot of locks and only gives you like kind of a decent payoff for it. But on the other hand, giving you that extra re-ride is pretty freaking sweet. That's cool. If you're trying to build up markers, you can do it. And in the late game, when you have built up a lot of markers with presumably like Venus Luquier or something, then that's also pretty sweet because bada bing, bada boom, you have more lock fodder potentially when you flood the field. So yeah, the ride and power is cool, but I think you need to really understand when to use this card, because if you misplay with it and you really are in a position to misplay with it, it's kind of tricky to use. Then yeah, you're going to be messing up your own attack strategy. So she's awkward. The grade 1 being a countercharger is really cool, but the fact that she sucks herself up into their card into soul for the countercharge can be a little bit iffy, like a lot of iffy. Ugh. Yeah, not so great. Marichica though, just as good, it feels like, as she was before. Her old effect now isn't exactly some super cool thing, but she had a lot of legacy behind her in Silverthorn, and her new effect, while it isn't like her old effect, is still really sweet, because the fact that you can just call a Dorian from Soul to the back row rear guard is all that needs to be said about that, right, buddy? You know, Dorian is still fantastic for Silverthorn. It's a great way to get a lot of card advantage back, get a lot of card economy. So yeah, the fact that she enables that for virtually nothing at all, it makes her a fantastic conclusion. So yeah, these are going to be going decent. Again, you can bring it up more if you want. If you're the Silverthorn god and you're like, gods, man, you don't even know how to play this deck, how dare you? Then yeah, tell me about that in the comments, right? So I'm myself a little iffy about it. Deadly Emperor Reverse. Deadly Emperor Reverse. Great stuff. Right here. Yeah, I like that. All right. What to say about him? Has good combos. Locking's a little bit weird, but you still get great multi-attack with it, and works with cards like Agile Fullback fairly well. Machine Gun Glory is another cool card. Offers a lot of potential combo ability, and the grade 2 and the grade 1 is generic, pretty much. Yeah, they're generic, and so I think they're like kind of a highlight there. I've heard talk of copying this with Rising Nova, and so Rising Nova is, again, as it basically always was in V, the mainstay way to play spikes. So the fact that these guys are more splashable is a really big highlight for them. Their effects are decent. I'm not like too big on spikes at a whole. I actually don't, we actually don't have a spikes guy in my group at all, which is kind of sad. I feel like that's a void in our repertoire, right? So yeah, this is more just off the little bit I've done. And yeah, it's great stuff. It just feels like it's the very definition of we love to have it, but it doesn't obviously change things. They're just good stuff, you know. So that's why they're up here around the middle bit. I don't have to, the fact that I don't have a lot to say about them other than it's good, just it's good enough for putting them up here. They're definitely above decent, I feel. Although you can't put them in decent if you feel that Emperor just feels kind of janky, because again, this is a locked rear guard kind of thing, and it's mid battle. It's a little, and the way they do it is such that you're locking standing rear guards, from my recollection. So that's kind of Elul. Elul is going bottom of decent, mainly because as a standalone unit, she's actually pretty cool. The Steam Maidens are basically ghosty, but in reverse, and it tracks because this lovely artwork of Elul's is actually the same person who did Beatrice's artwork. I did not know that until recently, so that was a really cool fun fact here. But yeah, anyway, the Steam Maiden playstyle is really strong. It's just woefully under-supported. People have been talking about Mystery Flare as a combo for it. I don't see it very much. It seems really clunky to me, and Mystery Flare's, if you're going to be running Mystery Flare stuff for Mystery Flare, you should just do Mystery Flare, because he's much more of a solid win condition than Elul is. But if Elul had more Steam Maiden support in V, this would hike up very quickly, because she is actually so free as a Vanguard. She's so freaking free, and the multi-attack here is pretty cool if you use it with Force 2, although I think that the numbers are kind of low, so you probably want to just do Force 1. Otherwise, your opponent will just have an easy time guarding it regardless. So yeah, it's the very definition of has good potential. That's why it's here. It just has so much good potential that it can do, man. I want these guys to get more. Gears is one of my favorites, and I did a little bit of it. One of my buddies, he did a fair bit of it too. But even, you know, for as dedicated as he is to, you know, cards like this, he dropped it very quickly because he just realized right off the bat that you just don't build a deck with this V yet. So will this get a reverse? I would certainly hope so. Reverse Steam Maidens would not only be awesome aesthetically and lore-wise, but would also be perfect for getting this deck what it needs. So I think it fits. So maybe prepare for that. That'll end Dark Zone. We're on to Magallanica. And oh, God. Granblue, why? Oh. Both these guys. Sadness memed here. Oh, my face is getting red because I feel emotions for this, and they're not positive. The thing that gets me about these cards is that they exemplify two different problems that we see with clan collections sometimes, right? Clan collection whole has actually been pretty great. You can see this upper rung here has been very populated, and that's going to be a trend that'll continue, right? Anyway, so two problems. Two dose. Problem one, Cocytus. He is way overbalanced. Problem two, Negrobolts. Does not understand the clan's playstyle. So on one hand, you've got something that's way overbalanced, and I don't have a card off the top of my head that I would think is overbalanced, maybe like Nura or something. And then you've got straight up like Reiji. Like, I was tempted to call this Reiji tier and put Negrobolt in there, because I get it. You know, ooh, big, spooky, big number, you know, 20k power and crits. Ooh. Yeah, dude, no, don't bind your entire drop zone aside from triggers. Just don't do that. Please don't do it. Skull Dragon is going to cry tears of blood. And you don't want to make Skull Dragon unhappy, do you? Because he's still the best rear guard that we have in Granblue, by far. Debatably other than Beatrice, but that's really debatable. I still think Skull Dragon's the best. Yeah, so if you can't even synergize with your own clan because you're binding stuff, which, I mean, come on, guys. Is this not Reiji? Because Reiji's like, hey, you know what? Let's get rid of all the soul and put it into bind. Necrobolt's the same thing. Necrobolt says, let's get rid of all the drop zone and put it into bind. Like, come on, get out of here with that. I thought Bushy learned their lesson from last time with this one, dude. No, these guys are bad. And Cocytus is like, hey, lock all of your rear guards on the first attack only. So in premium, you can't even do bad bounty combos. I learned that, and I was like awestruck. I was like, that was the only thing that could have saved this thing, right? Rewrite it from drop zone. Yay. Get some potential unlocks, but it's based on how many grade 3s you have in Soul, which, spoiler alert, you can't get that many, like, other than through just natural means, right? So, yeah. Lock 5 to rewrite this thing from the drop. It's like, okay. But I didn't mention one thing. Discard 1, 2, 3, 4. Isn't that just balance, guys? Discard 4. Yeah. Whatever. Cocytus will get you revives from the drop zone, but that's not like what does regular Cocytus want a cookie for reviving 4 from drop zone or something like that? Because I'm not going to give him one. Every Granblue deck can revive from drop zone. What the frick made that special? Why was that a discard for? It made no sense. And sure, okay, he's got a defensive skill to get like a bunch of buffs by retiring on units, but again, this is retiring on units. And Cocytus Reverse doesn't have a means of reviving, so you'll have to rely on other skills to do that. So he is far from the complete package. He is too costly, and yeah, he's just sad. Not nearly as good as Ghosty or Night Rose. Dude, he's not even as good as Pinot Noir. Dude, Pinot Noir, like, puts both of these dudes to shame, man. To shame. Rock. Putting it in the meh over balance. Putting it right here. Rock is like Ramiel in that this is a superior ride that you don't want to do because your base Vanguard almost feels better. But it's not worth it, guys. Sure, yeah, you finally get a Vanguard attack, but then you're going to axe half of your force markers at end of turn for it. Was it worth it? It wasn't. Guys, this isn't like an optional thing. You have to axe your force markers every turn. And let me just come in, right? Because Bermuda Triangle is my most hated clan, right? I hate it, but I still did some testing with this because I thought Red Fear Raid actually had like a good aesthetic, right? So just come in close. Let me tell you something. You need to rewrite. Let me say it for the class. You need to rewrite. If you stay on Rock an entire turn, she will still axe half of your force markers. That means if you don't have regular referee raid and you just stick on this, let's say you went from 6 force markers to 3. If you stay on this, you now go down to 1 because it will round down your half of force markers. Garbage. Bad. The only thing keeping her is twofold. Twofold is keeping her from Sadness meme tier. One is, if as a finisher, she actually can work, but you have to use her as a finisher and have a rewrite potentially if you don't, right? But you have to use her as a finisher, dude. You have to end it that turn. And so for that, it's actually there. But is it as good as Lupina? No, Lupina is a better finisher, but it's still there. The main thing that she's actually keeping her here is the other 2 cards that she represents with, right? The grade 2 is fine. The grade 2 is pretty like generic. Bermuda tends to have a lot of those cards that are just neat utilities, so this isn't anything different from. But the grade 1 is a great defensive, just Soul Blast a bunch of cards to get like a draw and a huge shield is actually something that I can see played in some different variants there. So yeah, please, the way I see it, probably like Lupina variant is still better than just going pure referee raid. This doesn't feel like a good payoff. If anything, you set yourself back for the opportunity to swing with a big, massive Vanguard. At least with Ramiel Reverse, you don't like set yourself back too much. You'll still probably want to re-ride, but at least with her, she still felt a lot more like definitive and not just actively hurting you the way that referee raid does. So yeah. Ooh, okay, here's a highlight, Aqua Force. So I'm not sure why these are the old versions, so excuse that, but, again, this isn't my tier list, right? So sorry about that. Let's start with, so Cobalt Wave is going in decent. I'm going to throw them around here. No. I think Nagatsu. Actually, yeah, no, he's above Nagatsu. Actually, he's above Hyaki Vogue too. Okay, so, and Maelstrom is going into very strong. So, let's talk about that, right? Cobalt Wave is generic and cool. And by the way, Valeria was a card too, and Valeria is going to be part of Maelstrom here because Valeria has the whole on hit and attack pressure, and I feel like that's a lot more prevalent in a Maelstrom variant, just like the because of the on hit thing, right? Which on hit is a gimmick for Maelstrom. Cobalt Wave, cool generic boss. I think this is going to finally put any potential what was his name? Naval Gazer Dragon variants to rest. This is going to be your new generic grade 3 Aqua Force unit. You know, this isn't Thavis, which does Thavis things. This isn't Revan, which does Revan things. Revan was another kind of generic grade 3, but I think I actually like this one a bit better, right? What was his name? Tetra Drive, he does his own thing, right? And Maelstrom, of course, does his own thing, right? But Cobalt Wave is like the everyman's Aqua Force unit. The fact that he buffs up front row and exchanges a bunch of positions and things like that is kind of cool, you know? Like, you can really combo it off of a lot of basic cards, like Tidal Assault. You've got cards such as freaking Terrific Coil. That's another restander. Coral Assault can combo with it. I mean, if you want to do Valeria, you can do Valeria in there too, right? It's just generic. That's why it's only in the, it's like the definition of being in the middle of all this, right? Nothing pushes us up here because there's not like dedicated support for it. It's not meant to be strong, I think. It's just meant to be like cute, casual play kind of card, but it does it well. It does it genuinely well. I thought like it was going to be like down here. When I first thought about it, I actually lost a bet to my buddy because it was like at least decent, right? I thought it was like going to be nothing, but he's like, no, Cobalt Wave's the wave, dude. Watch Maelstrom be ass. And that was false. Maelstrom is incredible, but still, I lost the bet on the basis that Cobalt was better than my expectations set out for it. And so, yeah, if you're just wanting to look for clean, I mean, hell, this is even like a great unit if you're trying to introduce someone to Aqua Force, I think. And just for that extra little bit of spice, it kind of feels like a Dimension Place unit, doesn't it? Thanks to all of like the power buffs it'll get. Okay, Maelstrom Reverse and I guess Valeria, but mainly Maelstrom Reverse. Why is he all the way up here? One thing is because Maelstrom Reverse is a part of the Maelstrom deck, and for you folks who have may not kept up with BRO in V Premium, there's a guy named like Kogze or something like that, right? I wish I had ran into him in the tournament, but unfortunately I never got an opportunity to play him there. I was playing different dudes like Toby TCG and whatnot, right? So anyway, he went 9-0 with Maelstrom. And that's because Glory is a fantastic win condition. I said this in a couple of my profiles. I'll say it again. Glory is a fantastic win condition, especially with 15k heals being the new norm for a lot of decks. His one card guard restriction is just wild, out of this world. Can literally just blow dudes out of the water, and pun 100% intended there, right? But yeah, it blows dudes out of the water. So Maelstrom's already a strong deck, and Maelstrom Reverse is cool because Maelstrom Reverse offers you a different playstyle. Whereas like regular Maelstrom had like the multi-attack pressure and whatnot and required like on-hit pieces, you don't need on-hit pieces for Maelstrom Reverse. It's actually the opposite. It's the reverse, right? You get benefits for not hitting, and you force your opponent to use up a lot of cards, like actually force them to do it. So my best bud, right? You know, Fourth Fall, right? He's been doing stuff with Maelstrom Reverse, and he's going to be releasing a video on this explaining it a bit more. And Commander Jaime has already done a collab video with that, so it's getting documented, and it's very promising. You don't generally run Maelstrom Reverse at 4 unless you're going for a pure Reverse and Glory variant, which can happen. I think you can actually build stuff around, and I've seen pretty clever stuff like using Tidal Assaults and having Tidal Assaults with attacks intentionally in order to get you more locks for Maelstrom Reverse. But yeah, you can also run it with regular Maelstrom and Glory as a 3 Maelstrom hybrid. It does just physically give you more Maelstroms to search out, and it's also just awesome because whereas with regular Maelstrom, in order to actually get advantage off your drive checks and your restands, you had to run things such as Pressuring Dragon or just get draw Chronicers. This card isn't like that. You will straight up get the extra drive. Yeah, you'll just straight up get an extra drive and a crit on top of that. It's a very pressuring unit, and it will also just wipe out your opponent's field. And wiping out the opponent's field is a really, really good thing for Aqua Force. Aqua Force doesn't really have retirement. It did a little bit with Thavis, and I think it was really with Thavis that retiring the opponent's rear guards was actually like a thing back in G and whatnot for Aqua Force. But here, it's just taken to the next level, to the top level even. You can really just clear them all out and then move on to ripping out your opponent's hand if you have the setup for it. But yeah, again, it's not like a one-to-one seamless transition and setup, but it definitely works. It definitely has a lot of merit. And I think that when you're tying it to a borderline meta deck already and you're giving it more options, and its option is actually somewhat of a better boss unit than one of its other bosses, yeah, it has to be near the top here. As a matter of fact, why is it even down here? It's going like, ooh. Revengers or Maelstrom? Maelstrom. No, my bias. Revengers. Okay. Mega Colony. Great stuff. Up here. Yeah, above Raptors. Actually, Himiko needs to go down a little bit. Actually, no. Himiko needs to go like here. Okay, so Master Beetle. Really great. Freaking Armor Beetle. Also really great. Brilliant Blister is like a staple. Brilliant Blister is chef's kiss because he has the ability to, and I brought this up, right, with other cards. He's an out to Hamiel. Yeah, you can paralyze Hamiel before they even get a chance to sack you with it. And it's just for Soul Blast. And the fact that like it can give you like draws, and at the very least it bounces back to hand, right? Which is going to be prevalent for a combo that I'll just bring up in a bit because that helps with the efficiency of this deck. Brilliant Blister is just all purpose. It's not intrusive. It's a great grade 1. It's a fantastic like ceiling in terms of what you can defend against. The only weakness of Brilliant Blister I find is a combination of having Soul Blast cost tied to both of his effects. The bounce is free, but if you want to get a draw, you'll Soul Blast. Now, the Soul Blast cost isn't that bad, actually. Mega Colony can build Soul pretty like easily, so it's not that bad. If anything, you're drawing on a resource that isn't as intrusive as Counterblast, because if you don't have high-class Moth, then Counterblast become an issue. But Brilliant Blister is fantastic, and his only weakness is the fact that he can only use his defensive skills. The opponent's Vanguard is at rest. So presumably, in order to make the most out of this, you're going to be guarding with it when the opponent declares an attack with the Vanguard, but they can play around it by attacking with the Vanguard last, so it can be distinctly played around. But again, against things like Hamiel and whatnot, that can kind of suck for them. But it's if they got a lot of crits during main phase, then okay, that will wipe you out. But again, it's not like Hamiel's the only thing you want to stop. You can stop like Volca goes. You're going against Link Joker. You can stop all sorts of stuff. So yeah, still Brilliant Blister is amazing. Armor Beetle doesn't seem that much at first, but the fact that he stops intercepts and boosts is a really debilitating restriction. Resting one of your rears helps a lot because you're able to add up your rest count for Master Beetle. And one of the cool combos, and I think Bushy intended this was a really good play on their part. If you use the effect of Armor Beetle and rest Brilliant Blister will still be able to bounce back during the end of the turn. So you have a really, really good rest target for it. And now you have cards that do rest themselves. Like, for instance, if I remember correctly, I think Medical, no, Butterfly Officer does it. But I know for certain that High Class Moth does it, right? So you're not always going to have rest targets, but yeah, it still has a great synergy with Master Beetle, which, speaking of Master Beetle is the unit that we are looking for to go with Giraffa, I think. Giraffa was such a strong unit because, again, ripping from hand and actually making them paralyzed is pretty up there, right? But the thing about Giraffa that was a problem up until now was we didn't know where to put him. In a pure Giraffa deck, he didn't really have another Great Fate that like synergized with him to the level that we wanted. And in a Gridora deck, he felt like he was kind of vying for the Vanguard spot with Gridora. Armor Beetle, sorry, not Armor Beetle. Master Beetle solves that. Master Beetle's paralyzed effect is a rear guard, so you can have him on rear if you want. But as a Vanguard, he gets these massive number of drive checks, dude. And oh my god, if you set things up perfectly, and you're actually able to have one standing rear guard remaining, like let's say Armor Beetle, so you can dump their triggers off on them. That's wow. That's just amazing to me that you can get so much value out of that card. But it is tied behind Counterblast for both of its effects. So if you're not having something like Moth, or hell, you can even go for things like Stealth Millipede. You can go for Butterfly Officer again, right? You'd have counter charges, but if you don't have those counter charges available, you're probably gonna have to hold off on it. So yeah, it's definitely great stuff and it boosts the clan's playstyle, but it's not gonna boost it up to meta. And this isn't like some way out of the water buff for Mega Colony that just like blows them out of proportion. This is just a good upgrade for them, a good solid upgrade, very notable. Nectar. We're finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel here, right? So next zoo being Nectar is pretty cool. I think, yeah, you're going to get great stuff with Cecilia. Cecilia is going, here. Okay. That. Go with that. So Cecilia, and this is also going to be including Augusto, who's another Musketeer. Musketeers, this may be a little bit of bias on my part, but I actually do know a fair bit about how to play Musketeers in V. Musketeers is basically the only Nectar deck that I would even like bother playing in V for fun, and just at all, period, I think. So yeah, I definitely have more of a knowledge base about how Cecilia works in the deck than with regards to some of these other units. But anyway, that's not a knock on her. That's a plus, right? So with regards to Cecilia, she is a multi-attack. The reason I like the fact that she belongs right next to the new Witch Grade 3, because just like her, this graduates Nectar, or at least this graduates Musketeer from being a 3-attack clan. Stan Peony actually gave more attacks, but Musketeer now has multi-attack going for it. And this is a multi-attack that, again, is a Vanguard attack, but it can also be a rear guard attack. You have to run Cecilia's, but the fact of the matter is that's not too much of an issue when running Cecilia reverse, because she is a Musketeer, so you can combo with Vera here and move her to the Vanguard circle mid-battle for the extra attack. Getting this as well is a marker acceleration, so you can get more of those Force 2s, and Force 2s are the wave in Nectar because you want to hit deadlier rather than harder in that deck. And on top of that, I mean that's really where her value lies, right? Is the fact that she gives the multi-attack, and she does it in a pretty fair way. Sure, it costs a counterblast, but you do have a dedicated countercharger for it potentially, in the form of Ruth. So it's not the worst. You will have to manage a little bit getting through her counterblast, but for good pushes, it's definitely worth it. And of course, we can always better call Saul. The only thing that's a little bit weird about Cecilia reverse is I feel inclined to not necessarily run what was her name? She was the Legion, Martina. Yeah, not necessarily run Martina as a grade 3 rear guard anymore, because then your grade 3 count becomes a little bit high, but you might still potentially run Martina, right? Don't run regular Cecilia, though, if you can help it. Regular Cecilia is still just pretty meh, I feel. So, yeah, you can if you want, but I think going with Vera Musketeers is the move. Wisteria is going into decent. Wisteria is going around... he's pretty generic. I think I'm going to put him right around here, right? Right next to Cobalt Wave. Wisteria is pretty good generic support. He gets you a lot of advantage, but he's not like some big push unit. He's just doing more of the basic Nectar stuff, which is get more value off of your board, but it's a board that doesn't really hit very hard. So he's really just in the middle there. I don't have a lot to say about him. Great Nature. Locks. You go down here. Polaris. You go up here. Yeah. Okay. So, why this? Locks is... bleh. Yeah, I get it. Great Nature does have grade 3s, you know? It does have grade 3s, and thanks to Big Belly, which we're going to be bringing him up for Polaris as well. Thanks to Big Belly, you have rearguard grade 3s to work with, but it just doesn't feel worth it to have an entire strategy around like your benefits are not that great. Sure, you get some retires, but these retires aren't like some super massive like detriment to the opponent because you only get like a couple of them. And on the other end of the spectrum, sure, okay, you can give a buff to your front row and you can like get a bunch of grade 3s, but you're again on if you're not like Dimension Police or something, or you even got that high class Moth who's treated as a grade 3 deck, right? You're not meant to be a big grade 3 deck. You just happen to have a lot of them because they make for good like buffers for the buffing playstyle of Great Nature, right? The success was the keyword for them. So it feels like it misses the mark. It feels like it doesn't understand what it clan is trying to do. Like you can say, oh, okay, it introduces new playstyle, but it doesn't do it very convincingly. These effects are a little bit underwhelming. Polaris, on the other hand, I'm putting it on top of decent, although you can make an argument for great stuff. Because Polaris, I think, as an individual unit is kind of a monster, but he does have like pretty like big number thresholds to achieve. So yeah, simply put, CB1 stand a rear guard if it gets like his power at the time. So if he got like trigger buffs and whatnot, then there you go. Actually, you know what? No, I'm putting him here. Putting him here, dude. He's awesome because he is an awesome standalone. He is. Okay. So anyway, yeah, CB1, stand up a rear guard, they get his power. If they're 50k or greater, you stand him up. If it's 70k or greater, then you stand the Vanguard up as well, and he gets plus 15 on top of that because we weren't already powerful enough. And this is just for CB, you don't discard cards or anything. So much in the same way as you've got like with Salome here, you can kind of keep your drive checks for the most part. Salome maybe not so much because you do call from hand, but still. At least with Salome, you're calling him to the field for extra attacks and your other joints can get you like advantage. This one straight up though, you don't have to do anything with your drive checks. You just keep them, you go again. So yeah, as long as you can obtain power buffs, you can do it. One way to take this, right? This is a little bit tricky. You can do crits with it, which can really punish the opponent if you hit crits. But fronts are also kind of a cool thing because if you hit a front, then your thresholds become easier because then the 10k buff goes to both Polaris and the unit you're intending to restand. So then, that's like an extra 20k instead of 10k. That really helps. How easy are these thresholds? Well, they take some setup. They do. So it's piece reliant, but it's not like reliant on very specific pieces. It just requires some pieces to really get there in a semi-consistent basis. So big investment, big payoff, and I like that. So yeah, he's going to the bottom here. You can really put him in decent if you want, but I'm going to put him here. So yeah, this is going to be on my tier list, guys. If you got any comments about that, if you think I'm wrong about anything, if you actually appreciated how I did this, then yeah, please do give me comments on all that. Again, my versus video is going to be coming up more towards the middle of Feb, so do check that out. And also keep on the lookout for some of my other videos. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do next. This was a surprise, so who knows? Maybe I'll surprise you all again next time around. All right, and with that, thank you very much, and God bless.